Co-ed Killer, featuring Edmund Kemper. Full name, Edmund Emil Kemper III. Crimes and Sprees. Edmund was famously known to murder and take the lives of the co-eds, also known as college students. Other than teenage girls, he was known to murder his own mother and his grandparents. In total, Edmund had 10 victims during his murder spree for the co-ed killings. His first two murders had occurred on 1964. However, there was an 8-year gap until he began his spree once again on 1972 to 1973. During that year, he had claimed the lives of 8 individuals, specifically 6 college students, and the other 2 included his mother and best friend. His first 2 murders included his grandparents, which occurred specifically on August 27, 1968. During the murders, Edmund would offer college students a ride, offering a gentle facade and demeanor. In other words, making it easy for them to trust him. In addition, it was reported his mother worked in the University of California, Santa Cruz, which made it even more easier and vulnerable for the others to trust Edmund. Once the victims got inside his vehicle, he would make sure the door handles were removed, leading for the girls to be trapped in. He would use his IQ 145 to manipulate the victims. With the bodies or corpses, Ed would bring it inside his bedroom and engage in necrophilia. The murder spree had occurred on the roads in Santa Cruz County, California. Investigation. The investigation for the case of Edmund was highly contrasting from the other cases with serial killers or notorious figures. Unlike the case of Ted Bundy, where they knew who the serial killer was, or in the case of Deobra Redden, where there was a clear authorities as a witness. The case of Edmund was unsuspected. In addition, Edmund himself was the one who came clean and confessed his crimes, without any suspicion from the police before the confession. While even before Edmund had confessed, there were reports of missing females. It was unsuspected that Edmund was the one who was responsible. In fact, he was friends and close allies with the police of Santa Cruz, making him seemingly trustworthy. Edmund would call the police from a payphone, then claimed he had killed his own mother. However, the police laughed and took it as a friendly joke. Though, the moment Edmund provided specific details, the police's smile had faded, and began to believe. In addition, Edmund had led the police to the murder settings and dumping grounds. During the interviews and the cooperation with the police, Edmund, due to his diagnosed psychopath, he could not feel genuine remorse or guilt for his victims, let alone his mother. In fact, he had stated he was the victim, seemingly said he claimed to have suffered more than his victims ever did. In other words, for this investigation, if Edmund never confessed, it's likely the police would not have discovered the killer for the co-ed killings. Trial and court proceedings. The court proceedings in the trial of Edmund did not focus on whether he did the crimes or not, due to the fact he had confessed it, and he would even create his own evidence to prove he had committed the murders. The real point of the court was whether if Edmund was legally sane when he did the crimes, or was it because of his mentally unstable condition. Following his arrest on May of 1973, there were delays due to the reports Edmund behind bars would attempt to commit suicide, though he would survive with minimal injuries. Edmund had pleaded guilty for the reason of insanity. His defense lawyer had argued Ed was profoundly mentally ill and would use the suicidal attempts as records and evidence. Though the prosecution's side would argue Edmund was legally sane and highly calculating. It was reported Edmund had engaged in cannibalism, similar to the case of Jeffrey Dahmer or Richard Trenton Chase. The court had declared Ed was legally sane, leading to the plan whether Ed would get the death penalty or not. In addition, Ed himself had requested for him to get the death penalty. However, due to the fact California had suspended the death penalty during that era, the court judge, Harry F. Brower, had sentenced Ed to 8 concurrent life sentences. He would serve his time at California Medical Facility for the rest of his life in a way. Childhood. The childhood of Edmund, as he claimed and proven, was structured with emotional abuse, social isolation, and early signs of extreme negative psychological state. Ed's father goes by Edmund Emil Kemper II, while his mother went by Clarnell Kemper. Both parents were extremely toxic and did not control themselves properly. In addition, his mother was an alcoholic who suffered from major temper. His father would reportedly abandon Edmund, aged 8, and the whole family and move out. It was reported due to his mother's hate towards her children, she would lock Edmund or his sisters inside a windowless basement basically every single day in their life. Edmund would suffer from the MacDonald triad, a theory of potential future psychological disruptions. In other words, that was a red flag. He would specifically engage in animal abuse along with arson. Even throughout his mental state in life, Edmund's mother would scream at Ed every single day, adding on to his trauma. At age 13, his height reached 6 foot and 4 inches, leading to him becoming isolated in school. He was reportedly often bullied for his height, peers calling him a creep or a big monster. In addition, he desired to murder his mother to make her stop screaming at him. When Ed turned 14, he was to be fed up with his mother's demeanor, leading to him moving out of the house, then attempting to move with his father in California. Though, when he discovered his father reportedly stuck the middle finger and rejected Edmund. Childhood, Part 2. After the rejection from his father, Ed was sent to live with his grandparents in North Fork, California. An unfortunate scenario for him, Ed. His grandmother was a parallel from his mother, highly criticizing the height of Ed. However, on the other hand, with his grandfather, they seemed to have a decent relationship, though Ed did not like the fact that his grandfather did not stand up against his grandmother for the verbal abuse. The relationship would eventually end one day in August of 1964 when his grandmother, Maude Kemper, yelled at him aggressively. Edmund would then murder his grandmother with his .22 caliber rifle his grandfather brought him for a hunting game. Ironically, he would use the same weapon to murder his grandfather as well, though it was not out of hate. Edmund did not want his grandfather, Edmund Emil Kemper I, to see his wife dead. Immediately after the death of his grandparents, Edmund would call his mother, then confess to the local sheriff on what he had done. He was arrested, but due to his age and mental state, he would be sentenced to Atascadero State Hospital. He seemed to ironically have a stable time there in the hospital. However, once he turned 21, tragically for him, he would be forced to move back with his mother, the very parent who had abused him throughout his life. Personal life, potentially affecting their crimes and acts. As Edmund turned into an adult by age 21, he would still have to live with his mother. The relationship between him and his mother did not change. Matter of fact, it had gotten worse between them. Aside from his relationship and living condition with his mother, his life as an employee working for the California Department of Transportation was seemingly decent. Though during his work hours, there was this one day he would break his arm and leg from a motorcycle crash, which led him to receive a settlement, which means money. Therefore, Edmund would use it to buy a vehicle, eventually using that vehicle he would use to hunt for his victims and future murderers. Edmund would also create a highly positive relationship with officers from the police department of Santa Cruz, leading to them often going to bars and Edmund buying them beverages. In addition, Edmund would engage in listening to recent investigation involving crimes. Tragically for him, during that era, many females would reject him, calling him a freak, creating a sense of fear of rejection inside the mind of Edmund towards female genders. Pivotal events. Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on the 18th of December, 1948 in Burbank, California. In 1957, his parents had divorced when Edmund was aged 8. In 1964, the murder of his grandparents had occurred using a .22 caliber rifle. From 1964 to 1969, Edmund was housed in Atascadero State Hospital. In addition, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and psychopath. On December 21, 1969, he was forced to live with his grandmother upon his release. From May of 1972 to April of 1973, his crime spree had occurred. He was sentenced to 8 concurrent life terms on November of 1973. On June of 2024, aged 75, Edmund took a selfie with an unfortunate background, also with a wheelchair. Quotes from Edmund Emil Kemper III. One side of me says I would like to talk to her, date her. The other side of me says I wonder how her head would look on a stick. Death by torture. This seemed appropriate as much as she and screamed and yelled at me for so many years. I just wondered how it would feel to shoot Grandma. You know, and that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. It would be a guess, but far more than 39. That's what I used to do. Little Herbie, would you like some peanuts? I would get a cup and throw it on him and say, "Shut up!" When he was a good boy, I would give him peanuts. Forensic inferences. Edmund's mental health was seemingly ignored by the system. He has been stating he did not desire to live with his mother. However, after he was released from the hospital, he was forced to move back. Worst part, it was near his birthday, likely growing a rage inside him. While others claim psychopaths cannot feel an emotion, sources could prove psychopaths could feel rage, while it's not a genuine emotions humans have inside them, which likely was the case for Edmund. He did not have a successful relationship with any females, even as a child, regardless if it was his family or not. Especially with his mother, he likely grew a hatred and a rage towards female gender, an inability to stay neutral around females, not because of love or a crush, but because of the rage that filled within him throughout his life. Seemingly said he was isolated as a child with his peers and families. It's possible he knew what was right and wrong. He definitely did. He wasn't necessarily happy with what he had done either, though he couldn't help but commit these dark fantasies in his mind. While he hated females, he likely wanted to explore his sexual desires after when he had the corpse of his victims in his hands. He likely confessed due to his exhaustion, and he himself, as said before, was not happy with what he had done. Edmund knew he was a dangerous figure for the world, so he likely wanted to prevent his dark self from taking over. Overall, the mind of Edmund was heavily complex, mixed with a lot of rage and hate towards female gender. Legacy and impact. The case of Edmund Emil Kemper III crushed the image of a gentle giant. Edmund was one of the serial killers who was closely interviewed with the FBI, aside from Ted Bundy. Edmund is considered the most organized serial killers. The Netflix series of Mindhunter involved the case of Edmund. The hospital Edmund was housed him failed to recognize him as a future threat. Edmund is considered a model prisoner till this day. Edmund had created audiobooks for the people with disabilities. It's still complex till this day to say whether Edmund may have felt a sense of genuineness.